I'm just gonna say it. The current stat system in Destiny 2 is starting to show its age. Every build in the game will require you to max out the same stat, and for the most part, your other stats don't really matter. What has happened to the sandbox in the past few years to make this happen? And what are some ways we could update the stat system to bring it up to standards of the modern Destiny 2 sandbox? Hey everyone, I'm Rzeki, and welcome to my design analysis on the stat system in Destiny 2. As always, thanks so much for tuning in. If you like what I have to say, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for weekly Destiny design videos and regular live streams. We also have a Discord server, so if you're interested in talking to some pretty cool Guardians about all things Destiny, definitely head over there. With all that out of the way, we got some stats to talk about. I think the best way to start is to briefly go over how the current stat system works in Destiny 2 and how each stat affects how you play. In Destiny, we have 6 stats: mobility, resilience, recovery, discipline, intellect, and strength. Each stat affects the cooldowns of a specific ability, with 3 of the stats also providing a secondary effect. Discipline reduces the cooldown of your grenade, intellect reduces the cooldown of your super, and strength will reduce the cooldown of your powered melee. Mobility, resilience, and recovery will reduce the cooldown of your class ability depending on which class you're playing. Mobility is for hunters, resilience is for titans, and recovery is for warlocks. These stats also provide a secondary effect, so they aren't completely useless on classes they don't provide CDR for. Mobility provides walking, strafing, and crouch move speed, resilience provides flat damage reduction, and recovery reduces the cooldown of your health regeneration. Each stat starts at 0 points and will gain its maximum effect at 100 points. These points break down into 10 tiers, where each tier reached will grant you the next upgrade. At tier 0, or 0 points, you have the minimum effect. At 10 points, you reach T1, giving you the next upgrade. Then at 20 points, you'll be at T2, so on and so forth. It may sound complicated, but all you really have to know is that every 10 points in a stat gives you a stronger effect. I think that pretty much covers it for the basics on how the stat system works, so let's move right into how stats work inside the current sandbox. Let's start with the PvE sandbox. I'm going to do something a little different here. I'm going to play some gameplay of a meta build from each class. See if you notice anything while you're watching. We'll start with a Shards of Galanor build for Solar Hunters, then we'll move into Banner of War Titan, and then into Sunbracer's Warlock. Alright, got that? Alright, here we go. Did you catch it? Each build pretty much just spammed abilities, with almost no regard for cooldowns. But wait a second, if you remember, all of our stats just reduce cooldown times. Well, maybe I just had tier 10 in strength on all my characters since each one was using powered melees. That makes sense. Actually, let me show you my stats. Uh-oh, I barely invested any strength at all. And on Warlock, I had almost no discipline, but yet I was still spamming grenades. At the end of the day, the cooldowns don't really matter. We've gotten to a point in Destiny where our builds are so powerful that we've pretty much overshadowed the need for any of our stats. Hunters can refund their powered melees by just getting kills with powered melees. Titans don't care once they get Banner of War procced, and Warlocks regen their abilities through the mod system and exotic armor perks. This also applies mostly across the board for all the subclasses I didn't show as well. Arc Hunters literally have infinite uptime on their melees and class ability. If cooldowns don't matter, what does? Well, the 3 stats that relate to class ability cooldowns are also given bonus effects to ensure that they have some benefit to all classes. As I mentioned earlier, mobility provides move speed, resilience provides damage reduction, and recovery will lower your health recovery cooldown. I put health regeneration cooldown into its own category since it's not actually an ability. Out of these 3, there's really only a single one that provides a highly useful benefit. If you've already been familiar with the Destiny 2 meta for about the past year or so, or maybe you've watched a few build guides, you'll have noticed that every build recommends 100 resilience. This is because resilience provides a flat amount of damage reduction from all sources. At tier 10, you're given 30% DR, with each subsequent tier lower dropping about 3%. Damage resistance in Destiny is usually dependent on armor mods, and all the armor mods are targeted towards a specific source of damage, such as arc resistance, void resistance, or solar resistance. There are some other sources of DR like woven mail, but resilience is by far the easiest one and is both a permanent source of DR and works for any source of damage, not just specific types of damage like for the armor mods. This is a very strong effect, and honestly was a really good rework to the stat to make it useful outside of Titan barricade cooldowns. The other two class-related stats, mobility and recovery, do not have an effect nearly as strong as this. Mobility is by far the worst offender, with it only giving move speed, and notably, while not sprinting. So in short, mobility literally provides nothing of value to Titans and Warlocks, or really to Hunters either for that matter. Recovery provides health regen, which, to be fair, can be helpful in some situations. The only problem here is that you could replace this benefit with leg armor mods such as recuperation and better already, or even some subclass options as well. Most builds already include these low-cost mods, so there's probably no reason to build into the recovery stat anyway. To get back to resilience, there's a big issue. Since resilience is the Titan-related stat, it provides Titans with a cooldown reduction to their barricade ability. So the problem here is that Titans can actually double dip into the resilience stat. They not only gain the lower cooldown for their class ability, but they also gain DR for free in addition to it. Hunters and Warlocks, in comparison, have to make a trade-off between their class ability cooldowns and the powerful damage reduction provided by resilience. And yes, technically it's possible for a Hunter or Warlock to build into both class stats, both their own and resilience, but it becomes more difficult as you need to consider building into a stat such as Discipline as well that allows you to use your grenade cooldown more often. So what could be done to bring all three of these stats to the same level of usefulness? I think the big thing that Resilience did right was being redesigned to make Titans more tanky and help Titans to build into the Titan fantasy. The other class stats should be redesigned to do something similar. Mobility should make Hunters more Hunter-like, and Recovery should, well, make Warlocks more Warlock-like. Here's a couple ideas I had that could be possible ways to do this. Of course, these options may not be the best way, but it should help to explore the concept a bit more. Let's start with Recovery, the Warlock class stat. Recovery reduces the cooldown on the Rift ability, and also reduces the cooldown on health regeneration. The great thing about Recovery, compared to Mobility, which we'll get to in a second, is that it's already a defense-oriented stat. While Resilience makes you harder to kill by reducing incoming damage, Recovery makes you harder to kill by allowing you to heal easier. So we could probably make Recovery match Resilience by allowing it to make healing effects stronger in general. The simplest way to do this would be to add some amount of flat bonus healing on top of any healing source. For example, the Recuperation Leg mod heals you when you pick up an Orb of Power. At higher recovery tiers, we could increase this healing by a flat percent. Maybe this next one's a bit out of the box, but instead you can make it so kills refund a very small amount of health, increasing with each tier. This one, admittedly, might be a bit too strong. But the idea here is that Recovery makes you a healing machine, just like Resilience makes you tankier. These aren't the only options, but just some food for thought on ways to make Recovery more useful. Now for Mobility, the Hunter class stat. Right now, it reduces the cooldown of the Hunter dodge, and increases walking, crouch, and strafe speeds. At a surface level, maybe adding increased sprint speed to that list would also be a nice change, but still wouldn't make the stat to be on par with that of Resilience. I think Mobility should make the player more agile, and there's a few ways to go about that. We could give Hunters some more aerial gameplay, so adding some level of airborne effectiveness per tier might help. Resilience gets flinch resist as well, so this might be a good parallel for that. Mobility is in a weird spot for me. While the other two class stats are defensive stats, Mobility is pure utility. Currently, it has no real defensive component. Finding a benefit that matches flat DR or a strong healing effect is challenging. So maybe I think we might have to step over some toes here and give it some defensive capabilities as well. We don't want to go too far since we still want mobility to be the agility stat. Maybe while sprinting and or airborne you gain some amount of DR. Maybe we want high mobility to feel like you're in the Matrix, and sprinting gives you a small chance to not get hit by attacks that otherwise would have damaged you. Some other options that are more utility focused would be increasing weapon reload and handling speeds, maybe something with jump height, although now we're starting to get into the Stompies territory. I'm really not sure here. I think the best option to make mobility on par with the other class stats is to just give it some amount of defensive abilities in some way. The other three stats currently only provide cooldown reduction. Honestly, I think they should also gain a bonus effect just like the class stats. This further would incentivize building into these stats, and underused ones like intellect might actually gain some popularity. Discipline is probably the most popular generic stat. Discipline reduces the cooldown on your grenade ability. Really, the only thing I could think of here is to just improve your grenade. For the most part, this might just mean dealing more damage as you gain stat tiers. Or maybe we could steal from armor mods and allow kills with your grenade to refund your grenade. Again, these might not be the best options, but are some ideas to illustrate the concept. Strength, I think, could follow a similar pattern as discipline, but for melees. Melee attacks are special since you have both powered and unpowered options. I think strength could improve the damage of both melees per tier, and maybe could also refund some melee energy on powered melee kills. Intellect is probably the most underused stat in the game, probably even behind mobility, since at least mobility might be taken by hunters in some circumstances. Intellect reduces the cooldown of your super, but I think intellect could also be used to improve other things that relate to your super energy. What do I mean by this? Well, the easiest way to regain super energy is through orbs of power. We can make it so higher intellect will make orbs either spawn more often or will improve their effectiveness. I kind of want you to think of this similarly to Ember of Ashes on Solar. Maybe intellect could also be pivoted to increase the chances of spawning subclass pickups, like fire sprites and tangles. I think there are a lot of different paths you could take with intellect, and these are just some examples of ways to go about it. In PvP, the story is a little different. The builds that shine in PvE don't really work here, since a lot of the ability refunds are granted from killing enemies. Spawning and collecting orbs, damaging groups of adds to return ability energy, etc. do not exist in PvP. The cooldown system actually makes sense here. This might be evidence of Bungie ignoring the PvP sandbox over all these years, but that's another video. Even what's best in PvE stat-wise doesn't really apply. Resilience, surprisingly, isn't the top dog here. All it provides in PvP is a small amount of bonus health. Most players will be fine at tier 6 and above in PvP, instead of always going for tier 10. This also opens the door to build into other stats. Recovery helps players quickly rejoin the fight after being injured, since they could recover their health faster. Intellect is the only reliable way to gain your super energy during a Trials of Osiris game, for example. If you don't have at least tier 6 intellect, you might not even see your super before the game ends. PvP is a totally different beast because it almost entirely relies on cooldowns for regaining your abilities. It's hard to make suggestions for improving stats in PvE when those improvements might negatively impact the PvP sandbox. This is why I'm mostly focused on PvE in this video, but Bungie should probably investigate ways to improve the stat system across the board in both PvE and PvP. The last major thing I want to go over is armor stat rolls. If we're looking to improve all the stats, then we want players to be able to more easily build into them. For those who don't know, it's literally impossible to have a piece of armor drop with 2 spikes in different class stats, or 2 spikes in different generic stats. For example, you'll never find an armor piece with both high mobility and high resilience. This is because armor has 2 stat buckets. One bucket, mobility, resilience, and recovery, and the other bucket, discipline, intellect, and strength. Each bucket has a maximum of about 30 points that could be allocated amongst the 3 stats. The number isn't exactly 30, but using 30 will make it easier to describe how the system works. If we have an armor piece with 15 mobility, now we only have 15 points left for both resilience and recovery. So one possible stat spread is 15 mobility, 7 resilience, and 8 recovery. 15 plus 7 plus 8 equals 30. This also applies to the other bucket. You might now be able to see why the resilience double dipping issue I mentioned earlier is actually an issue. Hunters, for example, want both mobility for their class benefits, but also want resilience for the damage reduction. But the way the armor stats are allocated, you can't find armor in the game with spikes in both resilience and mobility. You might be able to find 15 points in both, but even with 4 armor pieces with a 15 mobility, 15 resilience stat roll, you'll only have 60 points in each stat, aka tier 6 mobility and tier 6 resilience. So Titan players don't have this worry. They only care about resilience. The way armor stat rolls work gives an advantage to one group of players over another. That's a big issue. And on top of that, if we are improving mobility and recovery, maybe Titans will want to build into those stats as well, but are then put in the same pickle that Warlocks and Hunters have been in for the past year. Something should be changed here to make it easier to build into multiple class stats and or general stats. I'll admit that this is a big ask and would fundamentally change the balance of the game. So this isn't something that I'm going to say needs to be done, but something that should be considered going forward and possibly into Destiny 3 if that game ever ends up actually existing. So what are the takeaways here? In PvE, the stat system has become outdated, as most builds rely on means outside of your stats to function. Refunding stats is easy now, so cooldown reduction is not as important as it once was. The stat system should be updated to better complement the way players buildcraft in the modern sandbox. Class stats should be brought up to the same standard that resilience was. Mobility should make you more agile, recovery should make you heal more effectively. Resilience shouldn't be required on classes that aren't named Titan. Titans shouldn't have the explicit advantage of double dipping into resilience for DR and class ability cooldown reduction, while the other two classes don't have that same luxury. PvP is a separate topic, since it functions in a completely different way than PvE. While updating the stat system, the current PvP solution should be preserved while still bringing the PvE solution up to modern standards. And finally, the armor stat system makes it challenging to build into 2 stats within the same bucket, either class stats or general stats. So finding a way to either make it easier to build into 2 stats in a bucket, or make the stats within the same bucket equal enough in power that there's no reason to need to build into multiple. With everything said, I think this is a really interesting topic to discuss. Maybe you guys think that the stat system is fine the way it is. Maybe you agree with me, or maybe you have some ideas of your own. I'd love to hear them. Let me know what you think either in the comment section down below, or you could join our Discord server to talk about it in there. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe to get more videos like this recommended to you every week. But I think that's all for now. As always, I've been Rizeki, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.